We are in 2 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings chapter 2. And by the way, I apologize for not having the new class schedule. I actually have it, but I don't have it printed out to bring to class. So we'll still be Wednesday night in 2 Kings, moving on to chapter 3 and maybe 4. I've got to look at it again to be sure, but we are just moving forward. So if you're studying between now and Wednesday night, just keep going into chapter 3 and maybe 4. And I'll have the schedule on Wednesday evening to hand out for the next section we'll be studying. But let me run through our prayer list and announce one other announcement, and then Billy will lead us in our class prayer. I want to remember all those that are dealing with COVID, and the number is getting less, but there are still several that have family members that are dealing with it. In fact, Rose, her son-in-law Bill Connolly in California, is dealing with COVID at this time, and they're with her grandson, and so she's concerned about her grandson getting it as well. So certainly keep Bill and that family in your prayers. Eddie Coomer dealing with a broken leg. That's Sharon Bogdavich's friend. Richard LeConte Sr., we did find out that it was not a stroke that he had, but they are treating him, and hopefully he is improving, so hopefully he'll be able to move back to the assisted living facility soon. Gloria Robertson fell on Monday and broke her hip. She had surgery on Tuesday. She is doing well in her recovery. They're staying with us during her recovery. Angie Osorio, that's Vicki Wallbauer's mother, dealing with heart issues. Cheryl Barnes is still improving, but not free to get out yet, right? Okay. Nelda Schweiger's having tests. Alicia Solomon has a procedure coming up. She had tests this week, right? Okay. Waiting for the results? Okay. Sarah Alcius is improving. Where? Oh, she's just in the wrong seat. She's working closer, though. Last time she was back there, and she's working her way. She'll be back up here soon. Austin Petty completed his radiation treatments this past week and did well with that. Now, on June the 20th, they will do another scan for cancer to see how that responded and if there's anything else that they need to be aware of. So keep Austin in our prayers. Mark Morris, that's Debbie Smith's friend, dealing with upcoming surgery for cancer. Penny Carter dealing with bladder cancer. Mariana Melian dealing with tests. And Natasha Sylvester's cousin, Owen, very sick in the hospital at this time. Anybody else for the prayer list? Okay, I was also wanted to point out, if you missed it, this last Friday night was the game night here at the Fellowship Hall. I was unable to be there, but I have heard rumors. I have heard rumors that everybody was nice, and they ate well, and they had lots and lots of fun. So we're going to have some more of those, and I think the next one's coming up, maybe the second week of June. Is that what you told me? Okay, so we'll have the dates to announce as we get closer to remind everybody, and hopefully have sign-ups and things like that if necessary. But certainly that's a good thing to get together like that and fellowship with each other and enjoy each other's company and have a good time. So I heard that happen Friday night. It might have happened because I wasn't there. It was probably more fun that way. But anyway, anything else? Okay, Billy's going to lead us in prayer, and we'll get started. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings, thank you. 2 Kings chapter 2. You're going to wonder where I am when I start reading and you can't find me. 2 Kings chapter 2. This is an exciting part of the chronology in my mind because it kind of is a combination of a few of the accounts that we know things about, but yet you don't really. Let me say this another way. We're talking about Elijah and his departure into eternity in this chapter. And we talk about that, don't we? When you're a kid, you're growing up, if you're in Bible classes, you talk about the chariot of fire and Elijah and all of that. And so even as an adult, when you study it, you know somewhat of the account. But the thing is, when you're in a class like that, especially a younger class, you don't get into quite the detail that is in the text. You learn the account, you don't learn the details. And when we get to it in a chronological study, what you get is the details. And I like that kind of study. And so some of these accounts that you have some familiarity with, you learn more about them as you spend more time in the details of the text. And that's where we are. And there's been a couple of things that have happened in our most recent classes that have led us to this place. You know that Elijah actually has had a confrontation for quite some time with the northern kingdom, because Ahab had led Israel further and further away, even further than Jeroboam and others had led Israel away from God. Ahab took it even further, and his wife Jezebel made it even worse. Ahab was kind of weak. Jezebel was not weak. Ahab didn't want to do the right thing, but he wasn't strong enough to do the things that Jezebel did. So with the two of them together, they just really created this mess in the north. And Elijah has been battling that as the prophet of God. He was sent by God to tell them that because of their wickedness, there was going to be no rain for a long time. And it turned out to be 3.5 years, right? And that began, James tells us, with the prayer of Elijah. That's how it started. And it ended with the prayer of Elijah, right? And in the meantime, right before that prayer, what happened was they had that confrontation on the top of Mount Carmel, right? And that was the confrontation with the prophets of Baal, and they called down fire, or tried to call down fire from their god, from Baal, or Ashtoreth, and it didn't happen. And Elijah called down, he just prayed to God, and God sent fire and consumed all of that. And so they're supposed to now recognize that God is truly living, and he's the one true God. That's supposed to tell the people that. But the problem is it didn't change the leadership, and it didn't permanently change the people. So very quickly, we find that Jezebel threatens Elijah, and he has to run off into the wilderness, and he's so discouraged that he actually asks God to take his life away, right? And you remember in the account that God gave him some kind of information, I guess you will. He had the opportunity for this kind of confrontation with God, and he goes outside the cave, and there's the wind and the earthquake and the fire, and God's not in any of those things, right? And then there was a still small voice. And what was it that God was telling Elijah? You remember? There's an immediate event, or I guess application to what has been happening with Elijah, but there's something coming that's more important, or I guess the completion of it. The point that he's making to Elijah is Elijah has been the fire and the wind and the earthquake. Elijah has been the fireball, if you will. He's been the one going in and really trying to, for lack of a better way to say it, rip the Band-Aid off. But on the other hand, the one that would come after Elisha would be somewhat different. You know, he would be more the calm one. He would be the one that would accomplish things that Elijah had only prepared for. I find it very similar to the situation with David and Solomon, in that David wanted to accomplish the building of the temple, but God told him no, and the reason is because he was a man of war. But that wasn't that was a bad thing that he was a man of war. It was just saying he had a different role to fill. And David accomplished all of the battles that had to be fought in order for them to reach a period of peace where Solomon, whose name means peace, could then build the temple. Well, that's the way it was with Elijah and Elisha, who would follow him. And so God tells him, you need to go back, and I want you to accomplish a couple of things, and the most important thing to accomplish is this guy Elisha. So he's walking along, and there's Elisha. He throws his mantle on him, keeps walking, and Elisha knows exactly what it means. And what did it mean? You're going to take over. So he travels with him. So all this time that we've studied since that event, Elisha he's not a prophet yet, not at that point. He doesn't do the miraculous things, as far as I can tell, that Elijah has been doing, but he's traveling with him. And there's something that's going to come up today as these travels continue that I want to highlight very quickly here, and we're not going to go back into it and show you where it all started and all of that, but I want you to know about it. Way back when Samuel was serving the people of Israel, you remember the time frame in which that occurred? What was happening? It was before Kings, yeah. What was it at the end of? The judges. So we got the period of the judges ending, and we're getting close to the time of the kings. In fact, that'll happen with Samuel, as they'll turn to him and say, we don't want your sons to reign over us. We want a king like all the other nations, right? So Samuel is kind of a transition, and he's a prophet. And one of the things that Samuel accomplished is he established these, for a lack of a better way to describe them, schools. He established schools, kind of similar to what we have in our country today with like preaching schools. So he would take young men who had ability and willingness and all of that, and he would train them to go out and proclaim what God's message was. And they called these men the sons of the prophets. And so Samuel had all these schools. Now, I don't know why Elisha is different in that he's not in these schools of the prophets. There's nowhere in the scriptures that tells us why that didn't happen. But he's like a special trainee. You know, rather than going through these schools to proclaim, he's going to actually have, there's a difference between being able to preach and these people that spoke by inspiration in preaching, isn't there? I mean, the apostles, when they didn't preach the same way that I preached, did they? That should be an easy answer. Yeah, they had inspiration. They could say things that they didn't study and they didn't know about, and they could speak in languages that they didn't know about. I can't do any of those things. Okay, there's a difference in those two things. These schools of the prophets prepared men to go out. They studied the law, and it prepared them to go out and proclaim this to the people. But Elijah and Elisha are going to be different. They're prophets, which means they get the direct messages from God, and they deliver this to the people. Now, Elisha at this point is being trained by Elijah. I'm going to go back and forth with those all the time. Elisha is being trained by Elijah to accomplish that, and he's getting it personal. But he doesn't have those abilities yet, and that comes up in this account today. So we're starting, and by the way, Ahaziah has died. That happened in chapter 1, and Joram, some of the scriptures and some of the translations, mine, the New King James Version calls him Jehoram. It's actually Joram. And Joram, who became king after Ahaziah, was related to Ahaziah how? Do you remember? Did Ahaziah have any kids? Didn't have any sons, so he has no son that's going to reign. So who's Joram? He's his brother. Joram is the brother of Ahaziah. So Ahaziah is the son of who? Ahab. So Joram is the son of Ahab. There you go. That's what I was trying to get to. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is things are not getting better. You know, when Elijah is going to be taken away and Elisha is going to take his place, as far as the nation is concerned, they're not in a better place. They're just continuing along down the same path that they have been following ever since Jeroboam became their first king in the north. Okay, chapter 2. Yes. Yep. Yes, Jehoram is the king in Judah. Yes. And that's why I wanted to emphasize that I think the proper rendering of that is Joram, because it's hard enough to keep these guys straight in the first place, and then when you add two of them that spellings of the same name, then it's even harder. So I try to emphasize Joram because of that. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 2. It came to pass when the Lord was about to take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Now, I want to highlight something that wasn't in that verse just yet, but I think pieces or clues are going to come out over the next several verses that will fit into what just happened. It seems to me that what we just read in verse 1 that's kind of behind the scenes that'll come out in a minute is that God actually sent a message to Elijah and said, this is what's happening. It's not like they're just carrying along with everyday life, and then we're being told that in a little while Elijah is going to be taken away. It's that God told them, I want you to go to this place because today's the day that I'm going to take Elijah away. And I say that because in just a few moments, other people know it's going to happen, and Elisha knows it's going to happen. Well, if they all know it's going to happen, then Elijah would know it's going to happen too, because he's actually the one that's speaking for God. And so evidently a message has come to Elijah at this point, and Elijah has told Elisha, as well as other people, or maybe it just spread by rumor, I don't know, but that today's the day that Elijah is going to be taken away. Don't know when, don't know where, but the message from God there in verse 1 is what you need to do is you need to travel away from Gilgal. So where do they go? Verse 2. Before they go, Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to Bethel. And Elisha said, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So they went down to Bethel. Now I want to talk about that. So they travel. Evidently, I see this as we go through this chapter as God giving him steps. This is a test, is what it is. And God's doing it in steps. You know where they're going to end up is east of the Jordan. But that's not where they are yet. And I don't think at this point, based on the way it's written, that God has told him, I want you to go to all these places and then end up on the east of Jordan. I think God's told him now, go to this first place. And as he's going to this first place, knowing that sometime today God's going to take him away from the earth, he turns to Elisha and says what? Don't come with me. Why? That's a good thought. I think there's something more. I think this is getting human here. I think it's getting to the place where Elisha, I see the humanity of Elisha saying, why travel with me when you're going to be, I'm just going to disappear and then you're going to have to travel back, right? But I see further that it's a test. Because you remember when this started with Elisha, what happened was he's out plowing in the field and Elijah walks by and throws his mantle on him and Elisha runs behind him and says, hold on a second, I'll go with you, but let me go back and take care of my family first. And Elijah says, what did I do to, what do I have to do with you? And the point he was making is, I'm not forcing you to go with me. It was a choice, right? Elisha had a choice because you can't do what they were doing by force. You think Elijah ever had a choice? When God said go to Ahab, did he have a choice? Yeah, he had a choice. I mean, he runs off in the wilderness. Was that his choice? Later, he runs off in the wilderness. That was his choice. And then God said, you got to go back and get back to work. Was that a choice? Sure it was. God didn't make him do anything that he did. And the same is true with Elisha. And so as Elijah has been told, the first step is we're going to go here. And he turns to Elisha and says, look, there's no reason for you to go because you know God's going to just take me away. And then you're just going to have to come back. So why don't you just stay here? And Elisha says, that's not going to happen. I'm staying with you. Why would he stay with him? He was his mentor. He's the one that's been training him and preparing him to do a job. And on top of that, at this point, is Elisha ready to do that job? No, he's not. He's got one day left, but he's not. And the primary thing he's missing is he does not have the ability to do the things that Elijah has been doing. So, do they travel? Well, verse 3. They go down to Bethel. Verse 3. The sons of the prophets who were at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, do you know that the Lord will take away your master from over you today? And he said, yes, I know. Keep silent. They didn't go talk to Elijah. They went to talk to Elisha. Why? I think God is providentially putting in front of him the test. You know, how easy is it to get discouraged when one after another comes out to you and says, yeah, you shouldn't work that hard. You shouldn't go take care of it. If you had something you want to accomplish, let's just use this really simple illustration. So we have the game night Friday night. Okay? So what if, as the planning was going on, somebody went up and said, those really aren't any fun. And they're kind of a waste of time, so you shouldn't plan that. What if somebody does that? Would you get a little discouraged? Yeah, but you'd maybe push on. And then somebody else comes up and says, we've done that before, and it really didn't work out so well. I really don't think you should put so much energy at it. You'd be a little more discouraged, wouldn't you? But maybe you'd push on. By the time you got 3 or 4 people showing up and saying, I don't think we should do this, what do you start to think? Maybe I shouldn't do this. On the other hand, if you got people encouraging you, it pushes you forward. So why in the world would the situation in Elisha's life at this point be something that's trying to discourage him rather than pushing forward? To see if he's strong enough to actually take the journey. Is he strong enough? So these sons of the prophets, these are the preaching students, if you will. They come out and they don't talk to Elijah because, well, he knows what's going on, and we know how strong Elijah is. They go to Elisha and they say, look, you know that God's going to take him away today, right? And Elisha says what? Yes. What? Why would he tell him stop talking? You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like when you got somebody going through something and you go up and say, hey, I'd like to help you through this, and they say, hey, I don't want to talk about it. Why do they not want to talk about it? It's heavy on them right now. It's a heavy burden right now, and they're just not ready to talk about it yet. And I see that in Elisha. This is not, we put these people up on pedestals, and we think they're so much stronger than us and so much better than us. I see Elisha struggling in this. He is committed because of what Elijah means to him, but in the statement that he makes to these prophets to say, look, let's not talk about this right now, it sounds to me like he's emotional, isn't he? And so this is a challenging hurdle. This is not a fake test. This is real. So Elijah's going to be taken away. What are you going to do then? Well, I don't want to talk about that right now. So here they are at Bethel. What comes next? Verse 4. Then Elijah said to him, Elisha, stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to Jericho. And he said, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So they came to Jericho. So God sent him another message. It sounds like while these prophets are turning to Elisha and saying, hey, God's going to take him away, Elijah gets another message from God and say, well, Bethel's not the place. Let's go on down to Jericho. And so Elijah turns to Elisha again and says, there's no reason for you to go. You know that at some place and some time God's going to take me away today, and then you're just going to have to travel back. And you got a job to do, so stay back and do your job. And Elisha says, not happening. Not happening. I start to wonder why. I understand the human connection. That's his mentor. But I think there's something more here. I think that what Elisha knows is he's not ready. And I think that he's expecting something to happen as this day goes on. Maybe he doesn't know what it's going to be. Maybe he doesn't know how it's going to happen. But I think he's formulating a plan in his mind, because here in just a little bit, Elijah's going to ask him a question, and it's just like a snap, he's got an answer. And so I think this is in his mind, and he's formulating it. And he doesn't want to talk about all the bad of today. He doesn't want to talk about losing this one that's been so close to him. He's thinking of how I'm going to get the job done after this is over. And he knows he's not ready. So he says, no, I'm going with you. So they go down to Jericho. All right, verse 5. Yes. Oh, yeah. No, and it's not like they're, getting on a subway and going from one place to another. This is a journey. Yeah, I'd like to know some of that stuff. Verse 5. And the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho came to Elisha and said to him, do you know that the Lord will take away your master from over you today? So he answered, yes, I know. Keep silent. Same thing. You start to think maybe he'd be getting discouraged. Let me ask you a question. If you've studied this account already, you know what's about to happen. You know that Elijah's going to be taken away, and you know for the first time Elisha is going to start to do some miraculous things. So he's going to be ready for the job. What happens if he becomes so discouraged that he doesn't go with Elijah? The messenger has been stopped, right? Yeah. There's some application from that. You and I face hurdles all the time. We don't have the same responsibilities. We don't have the same abilities. We don't have the same opportunities. We're all unique, yet we all form together to make one body that functions the way that God wants it to function. What if the journey becomes too difficult and you don't keep going? What happens to everybody else? Look back. I don't want to discourage you this morning, but I've got several of the old directories from all the years that we've been making them. Look back through those directories. Look back, and I'm not talking about looking back and find the people who have passed into eternity. I'm not even talking about looking back at the people who have passed into another part of the country to live. I'm talking about the people who have passed back to the world. Does that hurt us? Are there people that have been here in the past that have been an asset to this family, to this body, and helped us accomplish what God wants us, maybe helped you personally reach a certain place in your spiritual walk, and they're not there anymore, and it's because they didn't finish the journey? Is there that kind of a application from what's happening with Elisha here? The only reason, when Elijah is out there in that cave and God's telling him what's going to happen and what you got to go back and keep doing, all of that is dependent upon a man that Elijah hadn't even called to follow him yet. Now, God knows what's going to happen, but that doesn't mean Elisha didn't have a choice. And every one of these steps is God saying through Elijah and the sons of the prophets, are you willing to take that step to keep going in this journey? Or are you going to back away? Now, I know that God's plan is going to be accomplished no matter who He uses, right? But does it affect that nation and that man if he doesn't follow this journey to its end? Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's keep going. Verse 6. Elijah said to him, "Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to the Jordan." And he said, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. Same message, right? Okay, this is not the place. Elijah says, "God just told me I got to keep going down to the Jordan River." Now they're closer to the Jordan. That's a shorter journey, but still, it's another opportunity for him to get discouraged and say, "Stay home." And he's, "No, I'm not going." And 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood facing them at a distance, while the two of them stood by the Jordan. Now Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, so that the two of them crossed over on dry ground. Now that's a significant event that we just read over and think, "Oh wow, that's so cool," and then we keep going. But the significant thing about it is not that Elijah rolled up his mantle, it's not that he struck the water, it's not that God parted it and made the dry ground just like when Israel came into the land in the first place. It's that we got 50 guys back here watching it. That's what's important. Now, you don't know, if you haven't studied it, you don't know why it's important yet, because there's something about to happen. But what you do know is, do they know that Elijah can do powerful things? Of course they do. Of course they know what Elijah has been accomplishing. They know about the drought. They know about what happened on the top of Mount Carmel. They know about all those things. So they know what Elijah can do and what God's doing through Elijah. So it's no big shocker for them to see him take this mantle and hit the water and it part, and they walk across, Elisha and Elijah together. But it will be in a minute, so hold on to it. Yeah, it is described differently. You're right. Yeah, yeah, that's because when they were coming into the land, the way it was described, as the priest touched it, the water stood upon itself. So it's like it stopped the flow. But of course, we got millions of people crossing there. We got two here, so it does sound different in the way that it's presented. But he strikes the water, and it does provide dry ground for them to walk across on. Now that'll come up again. Let's go to verse 9. So it was when they had crossed over that Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask, what may I do for you before I am taken away from you?" And Elisha said, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." So he said, "You've asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me where I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if not, it shall not be so." And then it happened as they continued on and talked that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. What took Elijah into heaven? A whirlwind. That's a trick question, because it sounds to me like what happened was the chariot was the messengers from God that separated the two of them, and the whirlwind took him away. Now, if you want to say he was in a chariot in that whirlwind, I don't care. We're not going to argue about it. But I'm just showing you some of the little details of the text. But here's what happens here. Now they're at the place finally. It's been one step at a time, and now they're at the place, and Elijah asked the question that I think Elisha has been working on all along, and I think it's why he didn't stay home the first time, and the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time, when not only Elijah, but the sons of the prophets were trying to get him to say, "Stay home." He wasn't ready to do the job. So Elijah says, "All right, what's on your mind? What's the question that you're needing to ask?" And what do you ask? Double portion. Okay, that sounds a little odd. It sounds like from our perspective that what he's saying is, I want to be better than you. I want to have more power than you. That's not what he's asking. You got to look at it from their context. And their context is the firstborn was the heir. The heir received a double. He's asking to be the heir. The heir to what? What does Elijah own? Has he got a farm? Has he got wealth? No, he's pretty much just wandering around. I mean, for 3.5 years, he lived next to a brook and then in the home of a widow, right? He's got nothing. What he has is faith to do a job that God gave him to do. What Elisha is asking for is the strength and the ability to finish the job. Who's going to give him? He can get the strength. He's got to have the strength. Who can give him the ability? God. So then Elijah says, "Look, I don't make that decision. I'm not the one that gets to pass on this role and this responsibility. That's up to God. But I'll tell you what, if you see this happen, that'll be evidence of the fact that God's going to use you to do it." So nobody else saw that. Elisha saw it. So when he shows up to see everybody else and say, you know what? God gave me the job to replace Elijah. Maybe some of them are going to listen to it. Maybe some of them are going to be questioning a little bit. Maybe some of them are going to say, you know, that guy over there would do a better job than you. You see how that's possible? Keep reading. Elisha saw it, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. So he saw him no more, and he took hold of his own clothes and tore them into two pieces. What does that mean? He's sorrow. He's sorrowing. This is the man that has basically become a father to him. And he's just been taken away. Did he die? No. But is he coming back? No. So it's the same thing, isn't it? And he's been changed, because you can't have flesh and blood in eternity. So it's changed. That's permanent, isn't it? Sorrow? Yeah, keep going. He also took up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood by the bank of the Jordan. What's significant about the mantle? Is this like Harry Potter's cloak of invisibility? Is it a special garment? What's significant about it? What did it mean when Elijah was walking along and Elisha's out there plowing in the field and he threw the mantle on him? What did it mean? Pick up the job. That's the authority to pick up and do this job. I'm passing it on to you. So as this mantle doesn't go with Elijah, it's fallen to the ground. Elijah has torn his clothes in sorrow, and he sees that mantle there, and he chooses to pick it up, signifying what? I'm going to carry the job. I'm going to do the job. That's why he's traveled all day with him, for this job. So he has symbolically taken this mantle, which is no magic whatsoever, no special powers whatsoever, but it signifies the fact that he's going to take the job that God gave Elijah to do, now for Elisha to finish up. So what happens next? Yes. No, Elisha has not performed them yet. Yeah, yeah. Pick up the encouragement. That's a good point. You see that in the disciples. With Jesus, they've seen everything Jesus has been able to do, and they are so discouraged to the point where when he dies, they think it's all over. But when the resurrection happens, they have been involved in something far bigger, and it confirms to them they can do the job. Yeah. So this is the same way with Elisha. Yeah. Good point. Okay. So now he's back at the Jordan, verse 14. Then he took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water and said, "Where is the Lord God of Elijah?" And when he had also struck the water, it was divided this way and that, and Elisha crossed over. Now, I've got to get into his mind here and wonder, do you think that I want to know what he's thinking. Do you think he's hoping? I'm going to see if this happens. And he takes that mantle and tries. Do you think that when the water split like that he had to be surprised somewhat, right? Even if he has expectation for this, it has to be a little surprising, right? So what does it do? It proves to him that God's here. Where is the God of Elijah? He strikes that water and it parts. You've got to believe that's a faith builder, right? All of this uncertainty. You remember when you were in school, whether it's high school or college or a trade school or whatever, and man, when you're going through all that stuff, you want nothing more than to be done, right? You want to get out and you want to get to the real world and do the real world kind of things. And then the first time you went to the real world, were you a little bit uncertain, a little bit afraid? Maybe you had an ego and you're real confident, but you still somewhere inside were a little bit afraid. That's what an ego does to you. It covers up insecurities. I think Elisha's got to be scared. Elijah stood before the king and made powerful things happen. He stood before all of those prophets of Baal and Ashtoreth and made powerful things happen. And Elisha has just been training with him and done nothing. And now all of a sudden Elijah's gone and he's got to carry it. You think it's fearful? Of course he's afraid. But he strikes that water and everything changes. Yes. 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 Yeah. Made the water invisible, right? All right, let's keep going. Here's the second part of why that's important. Elisha crossed over, verse 15. Now when the sons of the prophet who were from Jericho saw him, they said, the spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha. And they came to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. How did they know that the spirit of Elijah was on Elisha? They saw the water. See, so that little bitty detail, as they're coming to the Jordan River, and we all of a sudden find out we got all these sons of the prophet standing out there watching them. Right? They're just watching them. They see Elijah go up and strike that water. It splits up, and they cross over on dry ground. They don't know what's happened on the other side, but only one of them came back. And the one that came back was Elisha, and as they're standing there watching, he does the same thing. So now everybody there of those sons of the prophets knows what? God's going to carry on the same mission through Elisha that he did with Elijah. Confirms who's taken over, right? That's significant. Okay, keep going. Going to run out of time. I thought I'd be done early today. 16. Then they said to him, look now, there are 50 strong men with your servants. Please let them go and search for your master, lest perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has taken him up and cast him upon some mountain or into some valley. And he said, you shall not send anyone. So they think, here's what's logical. If you see a tornado hit a house or take away a cow, what do you expect happened to the cow? Let's stick with the cow. What happened to the cow? Well, could be dead, probably dead. But what you know is the tornado didn't put him back down in the same field or the same place. It took him somewhere. So they weren't there. They don't know. How many people do they know that have been just taken into heaven? None? Okay, none. They probably have heard about Enoch, but how many times has that happened? Once, okay. So it just doesn't happen. People die, right? That's how they get into eternity. People die. So nobody here is expecting that God just took Elijah away. What they're expecting is this has happened where this storm has come, and evidently they've seen something about the storm, which you would see. I mean, you could see one here if it's at the other side of the county, right? So they would have seen a storm, and so when Elijah explains what's happened, they say, well, maybe that tornado dumped him out somewhere, and we need to go get him. Does that mean they think he's alive? I don't think that's what it means. They want to honor his body because he has done so much. That's one of the things, I know I'm making a lot of side points today, but I really think they're important in some of the application of this. So many times throughout the Scriptures, especially in the Old Testament, you have these items that were so important, and it's just almost like they just disappeared. You know, the Ark of the Covenant. We have no clue where or how that thing disappeared, where they lost it. We don't know any of that. The items, we know about, kings coming in and taking things and all of that, but we don't know where all these items ended up. Noah's Ark, we don't have a clue. We have a mountain range, but we have no details and we have no specifics. Even scrolls, we don't have originals. Now, we have a little more info about that one. The reason we don't have originals is because what God told them is when they made a scroll, when it became useless because it was all worn out and everything, they were supposed to destroy it. Why is all of that true? Yeah, we would start honoring and worshiping the scroll or the Ark of the Covenant or the Ark of Noah or the items of the temple and the tabernacle and all those. We call Israel the Holy Land for one reason and one reason only, because Jesus walked there.
Is that why God kept Moses' bones a secret?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, because they would have worshipped, they are holy bones, because they were Moses. Well, what about Elijah? Would it be the same way, wouldn't it? And so that's what these guys want to do. They want to honor this man. So they say, well, let us go get it. And Elisha says what? There's no reason to go. Why? He saw what happened. Keep going. When they urged him till he was ashamed, why would he be ashamed? Well, it sounds like he's not honoring his mentor, doesn't it? So they just keep going, keep going. He says, send them out. Therefore they sent 50 men, and they searched for 3 days, but they did not find him. And when they came back to him, for he had stayed in Jericho, he said to them, did I not say to you, do not go? He knew what had happened, right? They were wasting their time, but they needed to satisfy their own curiosity, if you will. And so they went out. And you know what? That's the way it was even with Moses. Even with Moses, when God took him, did they find him and bury him? All right, 19. Then the men of the city said to Elisha, please notice the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord sees. What city? Jericho? Was Jericho, anybody know anything about Jericho? Yeah. Well, yeah, in history it was destroyed by the people walking around the walls falling down, and Rahab lived there. Anything about it in these days? Yeah, it was kind of like an oasis. It was a tropical paradise. It's actually where that's where the snowbirds went in their day. When it got bad weather, everybody else, they go down to Jericho because it was so beautiful and such a pleasant city, and it was, it wasn't in any danger, and it was tropical, and it's got the Jordan River there close by, so it was a great place to go. So they've just gone to Elisha and said, look, it's a great place, but the water's bad and the ground barren. So he said, bring me a new bowl and put salt in it. So they brought it to him. And then he went out to the source of the water and cast in the salt there and said, thus says the Lord, I've healed this water. From it there shall be no more death or barrenness. So the water remains healed to this day according to the saying of Elisha, which he spoke. So not important, right? Not important, except for these people have seen that Elisha can now do what Elijah did by parting that water. And so they go to him and say, hey, we got a problem. We've got this beautiful oasis of a city, and it's going to die. And the reason it's going to die is because our water source is contaminated. It's just not working. And so he takes a bowl of salt and throws it in the water. You live near the ocean. You tell me, if our wells go dry, how many of you are going to go out to the ocean and get your water for your house or your family? Why not? You can't live on salt water, can you? You can't. What about plants? What if you have a garden and you decide you're going to connect a line to a well that's got saltwater intrusion and water your garden? How well is it going to do? So why then have Elisha send these people with go get a big old bowl of salt and he throws it in the water? How's that going to cure anything? They're going to know that wasn't possible without God. So this is just another clue, another piece of evidence to build their faith in Elisha as well as God. So he cures the water. And by the time of the writing of this book, it's still clear. 23. And he went up from there to Bethel. That's where this all started, wasn't it? They went down to Bethel. He went up there to Bethel, and as he was going up the road, some youths came from the city and mocked him. This is the best part of the chapter, by the way. And said to him, go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head. So he turned around and looked at them and pronounced a curse on them in the name of the Lord. And 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the youths. And then he went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. So let's start with the last part, is he's on a mission to do his job. Samaria is where the job's got to be done, right? So that's where he gets to. Now let's deal with the other part of the account, and that is on that journey, these people come out, and they're yelling, they're calling him bald head. And so he gets upset with them. He has a couple of female bears, and the reason it's highlighted they're females is because there's nothing scarier than a mama bear who's got a cub somewhere, and she's going to get to you, right? So the female bears maul 42 of them, and we look at this and we say, that makes no sense at all. These are a bunch of kids out here just having fun, and he has bears maul them. Well, they're not kids. The word here that was translated youths doesn't deal with youth. When we talk about our youth group, we're talking about the kids in school, right? This word is a word that talks about young adult. These are adults. They're just young adults. And sometimes when you're a young adult, you're smarter than the older generation, aren't you? And so basically what they're saying, they're challenging the role that God has now passed on with evidence to Elisha. They're saying, yeah, maybe Elijah was a big person in God's eyes, but he's gone. You think you're so big, why don't you go too? And so he provides some more evidence, not for them, but for anybody else. You question what God's doing here, God will give you the evidence. Because of the next role. What I talked about a while ago with the 50 people watching, anybody could claim to replace Elijah. Anybody could. Any of the sons of the prophet could say, well, I'm taking his role. I'm better than Elisha is. But he was the one chosen by God. So these people are claiming, just like Moses did. When Moses in the wilderness, one of the challenges they made to him was, they said, all of us are spiritual. Why should you be our leader? Why should Aaron be our high priest? We can do the job. And God punished them for it. Same situation. False prophets, yep. Well, they didn't believe in the way God was doing it, that's for sure. But they weren't following God anyway, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm out of time. I'm actually a little bit past, so let's close with a prayer. Father, we're so thankful today to be here together as your family studying your word, and we're so thankful that as we study together that we grow closer to you and closer to each other. We pray, Father, that these lessons will help us to know your power, your majesty, and help us to even have our own faith strengthened as we walk with you today. Help us never to trust in ourselves, but always to trust in you. Forgive us where we fail you. In Christ's name, amen.